The passing of Roy Fokker also marked the end of Volume 3. And not only that, it was the end of the tapes Bash had brought over for me and my brother that night. Can you imagine that moment being the last one you watch, having to wait who knows how long before getting the rest? Well, I mean, Bash also brought over Clash of the Binoids that night, and it was super weird. All the voices were wrong, and well, don't get me wrong, Do You Remember Love is one of my favorite movies of all time, but if you've seen the dub, you know what I mean. The experience of watching it deserves its own video one day. Well, for a long time, all I had was the first half of the Macross saga, as far as Robotech goes. And I'm certain it was months before Bash's next weekend visit, and, sure enough, he'd brought the rest of the series. We couldn't throw Volume 4 into the VCR fast enough. And when we did, and excitedly watched the opening titles, the episode began, and I realized this had been worth the wait. The shots of the SDF-1 floating over a city, so close to the buildings on the ground, revealing the sheer mass of this immense alien vessel. This far into the show, it was easy to forget the scale of it all. Yet the vast city below, the veritechs hovering near the control tower, all illuminated by the colors of the setting sun, jolt those memories and evoke the weight of the stakes at play and the players involved. It seems Captain GLOVAL grew restless with the SDF-1 sitting in the ocean, hiding from the world. After the death of his longtime compatriot Roy Fokker, he'd had enough of secrets and hiding. He decided to show the entire world that the rumors of the battle fortress being destroyed and the citizens of Macross City having perished were greatly exaggerated by the Earth's benevolent world government. Despite the very forceful orders to move away from the city and mainland and return to the middle of the ocean, the captain instead proposed he will do exactly that if they are given permission to disembark the tens of thousands of civilians on board the ship. Floating over a major metropolitan area not only let the entire planet know the truth of what the government had covered up, but created a grand display to the Earth of the strength of the SDF-1, flexing the power Captain GLOVAL wielded in defending the world. A world he now sought help from directly in protecting the civilians that had fallen under his care. Ironic that the one thing that stood in the way of that was his own superiors in the military.
Captain GLOVAL, I'm telling you, you must leave this area at once. You have your orders.
I will not rest until those orders are changed.
Sir, I'm going to take the liberty to speak freely. Isn't it dangerous to be making threats like that while using the radio?
Vanessa, SDF-1 is the symbol of strength for the United Earth Forces, and if anyone knew the captain was resisting orders, headquarters would lose face, right?
Yes, and there's the chance that our communication signal was being monitored. Isn't that what you were hoping, sir?
You are both right.
The captain goes on to tell his crew that even if he faces court-martial for this, he must do anything he can to ensure the safety of the people of Macross. Unfortunately, his faith in the military conceding to his demands is almost non-existent. However, his gamble is that someone in the governmental body of the world has seen the SDF-1 as it traverses over the surface of the Earth over so many people, and one of these entities will be willing to reach out and accept the civilians on board the ship as refugees. It was a desperate ploy, and he asks his bridge crew to keep his intentions under wraps officially. Lisa and Claudia show appreciation that he'd trust them enough to confide in them. As they wait to see what happens, Claudia decides it's time for a break and a cup of coffee and excuses herself. Once she's gone, Sammy and the girls comment on just how strong Claudia is being in the wake of Roy Fokker's death. but they can tell she's still pained by it greatly. Lisa wishes she could help, and Sammy encourages her to join Claudia and show support on behalf of them all. Claudia sits by herself in the crowded lounge, her coffee untouched, hands trembling, trying to comfort herself in the blanket of the sunset and cityscape. And she isn't the only one. Rick stands not far away, sharing the same grief, lost in memories of the same fallen loved one, the same dashing smile, the memories bringing tears to Claudia's eyes as her coffee grew cold. Lisa enters and spies her friend, but something about Claudia's expression told Lisa she'd like to be alone. She is surprised to see Rick on his feet and out of the hospital, and his pilot's instincts alert him that he's caught in somebody's sights.
Rick? I had no idea you'd be up here.
Oh, I just had to get some fresh air, that's all. Besides, just staying in bed was starting to drive me crazy. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
By the way, what's gonna happen to all the civilians that are on board?
Nobody knows, but right now they have to stay on the SDF-1. That girl singing on the PA, that's your girlfriend, isn't it, Rick? Are you two still getting along?
Yes, at least as well as can be expected, I guess. She's been spending a lot of her time with her cousin, Lynn Kyle.
Rick, I'm really glad you're okay now.
Thanks.
Something about him seems so different.
You know, with all these civilians on board, it's a good thing they developed a new defensive barrier shield to cover the whole ship. The new system really is more effective, isn't it?
Sure, Rick, it's much better than the pinpoint barrier system, but the problem is it can't keep operating over a long period of time.
I see. So if the ZENTRAEDIs get serious, then everybody on board gets killed, isn't that it?
I don't know about that, but I do know this, Rick. I hope that's a situation we never have to face.
Me too, Lisa. Me too.
Kyle waits for Minmay to finish her rehearsals, but when she walks in, he's worried how flushed she looks. She faintly mentions how her head hurts and just how tired she is. And just as he stands up, showing great concern, she barely gets out that she just needs rest before alarmingly collapsing into his arms. He calls her name over and over, but she remains unresponsive.
Captain Gloval, look, sir, a secret crypto communication printout from the North American Ontario Quadrant.
The North American Ontario Quadrant? What could they want?
Here's the Dakota print. It says we will accept for residence all the civilians on SDF-1. Captain, it's wonderful.
last.
Really?
Well, we did it, didn't we? Claudia, set our destination heading for the Ontario Quadrant immediately.
Yes, sir. Canceling previous course, reset to the Ontario Quadrant as ordered.
Well, it looks like Captain Gloval's gamble paid off and all was well. However, the ZENTRAEDI, especially Khyron the Backstabber, do have a way of spoiling things for the SDF-1 and her crew. Khyron has had enough of Azonia's shackles she'd placed on him, arguing about her insistence that he sit and do nothing. She was attempting to preemptively stop him from plotting any more attacks on the Micronian battle fortress, even though she'd allowed Miria's skirmish. A skirmish she'd returned from morose and hadn't been the same since. Khyron insists the battle fortress was now even more vulnerable in the false safety of its adoptive planet, and the time to strike was now. Frustrated at her stagnation, Khyron cuts the feed of their conversation, refusing further answer to Azonia's hails. When Miria enters the room, Azonia is relieved to see her, and immediately warns she may need Miria's help in reining in Khyron once more. Her response is desperate. Instead of confidently accepting Azonia's orders, she surprises Azonia by requesting to be micronized, planning to infiltrate the SDF-1 as the three spies had. Azonia is completely taken aback by this and can't possibly fathom why Miria would ever want this. Miria isn't even sure she could fully explain it, but she insists. Azonia can see something behind Miria's eyes, an anger, a need, and decides to trust her valued second-in-command and allow her micronization. As the chamber dissolves and rebuilds Miria's body into this smaller form, her mind can't let go of the memories of battle, her defeat at the hands of her opponent, the shame she'd felt since. And the need she now had to kill this Micronian in order to wash it all away.
After all of my successes in battle, I have finally been defeated by a tiny Micronian. So now I am becoming a Micronian. I must destroy that pilot. I must.
At that same moment, that pilot was looking for Rick. Max and Ben find their wayward squad leader next to his newly assigned craft. Roy Foker's Skull 1 was a special VF-1S model Veritech and could only be handled by the most skilled of pilots. Rick wasn't sure who may have pulled strings to make it his new fighter, but he was grateful.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it? Commander Foker was always so proud of the fact he'd never been shot down. And now he's gone and I get his plane. Me, a guy who's always being shot down. It's just pretty ironic, that's all.
Yo!
Max thought it best to change the subject, relaying the fantastic news that the Ontario Quadrant had volunteered to take all the citizens of Macross City from the ship. Ben wanted to celebrate and found Rick to invite him along. He thinks it's such a great idea, he offers to treat his buddies to the meal. Ben boisterously moves the other two along before Rick can change his mind. While Rick takes a quick glance back at the last real connection he has with his big brother, he makes a promise to himself to take care of it for him. Khyron had put his fleet in orbit, preparing to launch his glorious attack at the Micronian ship. Who cared what Azonia's orders were? The glory of battle and victory awaited him. Also awaiting him was Grell, confirming his orders to bring Khyron's fleet into Earth's atmosphere and position them for a multi-phased attack. The battle fortress would be powerless to stop them, surely unwilling to risk any harm to their populace in the city below. The ship was Khyron's for the taking. Khyron's assault force launched from his flagship, barreling through the atmosphere, heading to the SDF-1. Vanessa detects them, announcing the attack to the bridge crew, who lament that the ZENTRAEDI couldn't have waited until they'd at least let the civilians off the ship. GLOVAL knows a battle over the city will be dangerous, but orders all fighters launched. Some of the pilots of those fighters had just sat down for dinner, and Ben receives his giant sirloin steak. Hey, if Rick was buying, Ben wasn't gonna go cheap. He was hungry enough for 2 steaks. Before he can even get in that first bite, though, they hear the call to scramble for battle, and Ben reluctantly leaves most of his steak behind. I was always happy that he got at least one big old bite out of it first. As they get to their fighters, Rick takes a moment to appreciate Roy's Skull 1 before climbing into it and heading to the flight deck. With the deaths of Roy, Captain Kramer, and so many good fighter pilots, Command had had to look hard to find the most qualified pilot to now lead their most decorated flight group, the SKULL Squadron. Rick wasn't sure what it meant that they'd determined that pilot was him.
This is SKULL Squadron number 1 and we're moving out.
Roger.
This is Skull Leader, we're airborne.
Did he say Skull Leader?
Yes, that's right, Claudia. It's Lieutenant Rick Hunter, and he's taking over Commander Foker's Skull 1 as of today.
Well, Roy would have liked that.
Rick issued out orders to his wing of fighters, but he kept Max and Ben as his personal wingmen since they'd all read each other so well after flying in Vermilion Squad together for so long. Khyron hungrily moves to engage the puny Micronian fighters, descending on them, bringing a wave of carnage. Rick is almost quickly overwhelmed as 4 ZENTRAEDI ships tail him, but as Ben warns him, Rick pulls a daring maneuver, proving that he's worthy of SKULL 1 as he quickly turns the tables on these fighters. Ben is ever impressed, but warns his boss to be more careful, just as he almost bites the dust himself. But no worries, Max has him covered. The battle fortress had ordered the fighters to keep the ZENTRAEDI as far from the city limits as possible, unaware of Grell leading Khyron's battleships into attack position. Their jamming of the SDF-1's radar warns Vanessa and the rest that the enemy was plotting something. GLOVAL orders the new omnidirectional barrier ready for use, just in case. The new barrier covered the entire ship, but had yet to be perfected, and it seemed field testing it would be done sooner than the ship's engineers would have liked. Far beneath the battle and the scanners of the SDF-1, a single Quadrano power armor skimmed the surface of the planet, carrying a very tiny Miria in a special capsule towards the battle fortress, planning to infiltrate it. Now, I'm not completely sure, but some vague memory tells me that this Quadrano pilot is Miria's friend, Seloy de Para. And I don't remember if this is a headcanon I made up or something maybe my brother told me long ago, but she is reportedly the one who delivered the attack that resulted in Roy Foker's demise. Not that it matters much. This pilot expresses concern for Miria's safety, boarding the Micronian ship with no weapons, and states how upset this has made Azonia. Miria dismisses it, saying Azonia is upset with Khyron and his bungling of everything. Miria reassures her friend she'll be fine, and they zoom off towards their target. Khyron presses his attack, radioing Grell, who is in position just over the horizon. He orders Grell to move the fleet towards the battle, but not to attack until he arrives personally to oversee the operation. Rick is the first to notice the battle cruisers and sends the info directly to Lisa. She informs the captain, who immediately orders the new, fully enclosed barrier system to activate. All systems engage as a reflex energy begins to burn in the heart of the system, powering a green energy field around the gigantic SDF-1. Khyron enters the command center of his ship and sees a concerned Grell staring at this new development. He is unconcerned and commands they open fire now. The powerful ZENTRAEDI blasts pummel the SDF-1, exploding all along the green field enveloping it. Despite the power of the direct attack on the ship, it remains completely unharmed. Claudia happily reports the new barrier system appears to be a success, but GLOVAL certainly doesn't relax just yet. As the ZENTRAEDI analyze whatever this green energy field is surrounding the battle fortress, Khyron figures if you can't hit it with a bigger hammer, just keep hammering it until the final nail goes into the coffin. Again and again they fire, and each volley is dissipated by the ship's new barrier, but the captain knows the ZENTRAEDI won't stop coming until they're destroyed. Sammy suggests radioing headquarters for support, but Lisa and Kim know such a request will be ignored, whether in retaliation for GLOVAL disobeying orders earlier, or because, if anything goes wrong from here, all responsibility will lie with Captain GLOVAL. He'd made his bed and would now have to sleep in it.
Message, sir.
Captain GLOVAL, we've got a serious problem. The whole barrier system's overloading.
Huh?
Lieutenant Hutter, the situation down here is really getting serious now. You must draw the aliens away from our ship before the barrier breaks down, or else
there isn't going to be any ship to come home to. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it looks very bad. Captain GLOVAL wants you to know that as of this moment, the safety of every single person on this ship rests in your hands.
I understand. Ben and Max, listen up. This is your battle order. will attack the alien cruisers at Alpha Romeo Tango 1-8.
Rick, we've been monitoring your conversation and we're with you all the way.
That's right, Skull Leader, we're with you.
All right. Now let's go see if we can stir up some action, huh?
The Skull Squadron attack the ZENTRAEDI ships directly, blowing out as many gun turrets as possible, doing anything they can to lessen the enemy's ability to continue this assault. Grell and Khyron can see their tactic has worked. The ship's shield is at its limit. On the bridge, more emergency notices come flooding in, overwhelming the bridge crew, yet all the messages say the same thing. Energy levels for the barrier system are overwhelmed, and against the continued ZENTRAEDI attack, explosion was imminent. Sure enough, the system blows. The screams of the barrier team blare over the comms on the bridge as they lose main power across the board, and Sammy sees the barrier itself is reaching critical mass, threatening to decimate everything. Lisa's first thoughts are to warn Rick to clear out. His team hears the message, and Rick relays the order just as Lisa calls out his name as the barrier's destructive wave expands. The wave begins to crumble Khyron's battle cruisers. Every building and structure on the ground become dust under the force of the energy surge, leveling everything around. Khyron calls for a retreat under the blinding light of this new Micronian weapon. His own ship pulls back to safety, the same safety that Rick and Max try to blaze towards themselves. Ben also follows, but Rick can see he's trailing too far behind.
Ben, hit your afterburner now. Do you copy?
It's too late, Rick, I can't...
The wave finally dies down, and for 50 miles across, nothing remains except for a giant crater and the SDF-1 at its center, where the wave emanated from, thus taking no damage. Sammy and Kim do their best to relay the status reports of the ship to the captain, but the most important one comes in from the North American Ontario quadrant. Something about the civilians, GLOVAL is sure.
The energy absorbed by the barrier chain reacted. The explosion destroyed the surface out to a radius of 25 miles, and the Ontario Quadrant Subcommand has refused to allow the civilians to land.
Lisa, tell Captain GLOVAL we lost Ben Dixon.
Rick, I'm so sorry.
Thanks, Lisa.
Rick, the people on this ship are grateful. But they'll never really comprehend all that you've gone through for them.
In Macross City, the press and the tabloids had surrounded Lynn Kyle, asking about their darling star and getting upset that Kyle was giving them no answers. It's just that Kyle was genuinely disgusted that so much attention was demanded from something as trivial as a celebrity, even if that celebrity was his family. But he blamed this pressure for putting her in the hospital to begin with. So Kyle decided to take this moment in the spotlight as a platform to preach his anti-war sentiments. It was far from what the media and masses wanted to talk about, but 3 certain individuals were hearing his words, and although they couldn't imagine a life without conquest and battle, they kinda understood what he was talking about. Claudia and Lisa happened to catch it too, and although they didn't believe the ship and the human race should simply completely surrender, Lisa isn't sure that continued fighting is the best path forward either. In another part of the ship, Rick was paged to a phone call. Any other time, he'd have been elated to hear from Minmay, who was calling him from the hospital. She didn't once ask how he was, just excitedly went into her life and how she'd been overworked but was now catching up on rest, and boy oh boy, it would be wonderful if he'd come visit her and they could catch up and really, her timing couldn't have been worse. And maybe a visit to Minmay would be good for both of them. But Rick had just lost Roy, and now Ben was gone too. He wasn't even sad anymore. nor happy to hear from Minmay. He was just numb. As Minmay continued to talk non-stop, Rick just wasn't equipped to deal with anything right now, let alone his feelings for her. So he simply hangs up, feeling that numbness, that emptiness, the desolation in his soul, matched only by the vast desolation that currently surrounded the SDF-1.
It's me who's lost, the me who lost her heart, to you who tore